Good morning, everybody. This is Marty from Dawgs blog. In the noontime report of the morning session of the Frank Carson et al. Case on January 31st, 2019. This is week number 37, court day number 131, if anybody's interested. Court scheduled to start at 9 o'clock. The judge showed up right at 9 o'clock, and she was on the bench at 9:10. The jury wasn't up yet. They had some issues to resolve. The jury is actually scheduled, I believe, for 9:30. They were talking in regard to the Beverly Woody issue. Marlisa Ferreira was wanted to use Beverly Woody's testimony in the prelim as the foundation for what Robert Woody had said to Miranda Dykes and some other statements that he had made, and also this statement about Corey Kaufman had jumped the fence, and that was the last jump that he had made. Comments along that lines, and Marlisa Ferreira said that Beverly Woody's testimony from the prelim was not all stricken. Judge Zuniga reviewed her holding order on 4/10 of 2017. And that testimony, she said, had not completely been reviewed yet, even though there were some motions to strike. Marlisa Ferreira was trying to argue that there was a lot of information that was given to Beverly Woody from Robin Attenhofer and apparently some other people that she apparently talked to. Robert Woody had said that Mom was up when he got home that night in her room. When you go in the front door, her room's right there, so you can't help but see her. He said, but Robert Woody did say that he didn't tell Mom much. He just said there was a problem with Bobby and Dee Atwell. And said there was, told Beverly Woody there was something that happened at someone's property, but did not go any further and tell her what the issue was. There was no further details given. He said he talked to Robin Attenhofer the next day. Judge Zuniga did make a comment, kind of a slight comment towards Marlisa Ferreira, where she tried to tell her what to think yesterday and that she didn't appreciate her doing that. But she said she cannot let Beverly Woody's testimony in the record. There's no information where it came from, but when and where it came from also. She says Beverly Woody's testimony is stricken in its entirety for this trial. Marlisa Ferreira tried to say that he was stricken for the preliminary hearing, but not at the trial. And he gave her one of those judge-like looks, like, you're not helping your case any. Now, Marlisa Ferreira is saying that she may put Beverly Woody on the stand. Judge Zuniga's judge-like stare got even stronger. And she says, you're not really serious. She says that's really, really, really a bad idea. Marlisa Ferreira said Robert Woody had told many people bits and pieces, and you bring all the information that was collected by Beverly Woody and what she knows. These are all stories, she says, that Robert Woody had said prior to any plea deals that were discussed. This is even prior to being in custody. He only gave bits and pieces to investigators and his family. As typical, Marlisa Ferreira argument has changed, is what Judge Zuniga is now saying. And she said that Marlisa Ferreira made an argument that Robert Woody said if anything had happened, to look at the Atwells. Judge Aniga admitted that she does the enormity of this case, and there's so many rulings that she is getting confused on this quote-unquote stuff. Judge Aniga said it. Marlisa Ferreira said that Atwells told Beverly Woody that Robert may end up like Corey Kaufman, and apparently she says they made other threats. Judge Aniga says, now this is really a different argument than you made yesterday. And if Robert Woody does not recall, they cannot use Beverly Woody's testimony that she has stricken. Marlisa Ferreira giving citations for the interviews on February 28th that rolled over into March 1st that she is going to refer to, telling the attorneys, all the attorneys, what she's going to refer to in those interviews so they can be prepared when she does her cross-examination. Marlisa Ferreira was being very friendly and trying to be as nice as she could to the judge today after what she did yesterday. Attorney Hans argued that Robert Woody's testimony about the last meeting was the first and only meeting that anything was said about Frank Carson's property. So it does not apply to 3/1/14 interview. That's the first day he was in custody. Hans read the transcript into the record where he said Marlisa Ferreira is trying to bring in other information and trying to make it sound like Robert Woody was talking about Frank Carson's property is not a prior consistent statement. Percy Martinez argued that Marlisa Ferreira has already asked questions in this area, so it has been asked and answered on direct, in fact, on redirect. Marlisa Ferreira argued the first interview, the stolen property was discussed, and Judge Aniga said that there has always been an understanding that Robert Woody's case was dismissed on the possession of stolen property that Frank Carson represented him on. And then he did go to Frank Carson's office. He said that everybody seems to agree on that. So now she's saying, is there another meeting that we're talking about? Marlisa Ferreira is now saying that there were several meetings with Frank Carson. Robert Woody was with Daljeet Atwell on one visit and Baljeet Atwell on the next. Judge Aniga asked, well, when was the first meeting? Marlisa Ferreira was somewhere in January to February of 2012, prior to the homicide. Marlisa Ferreira kept saying the phone evidence, here we go, and it shows that Bobby and Dee were in Turlock all day on the 23rd. Robert Woody is mistaken in his dates when the Frank Carson office visit and when they met at the office. Attorney Hans argued that Robert Woody was very clear that he went to court and the case was dismissed. Now Marlisa Ferreira is saying something different. Now also she is saying that on the date and day that Robert Woody is now mistaken and thinks that she can clear this up. And Hans said he did not recall there was any other meetings. And this is getting very misleading to the jury, and it's going to be even more confusing for them. Robert Woody probably won't be able to differentiate Baljeet and Daljeet's presence with him on which dates. He is not able to discern those type of things. There's no way that he can be mistaken. Robert Woody has repeatedly said there was only one visit in Frank Carson's office. Percy Martinez argued that Robert Woody has been very clear that they met on the 23rd of May, and that's when they discussed the thefts on Frank Carson property. Marlisa Ferreira again is trying to mislead the jury and trying to rehabilitate Robert Woody. He said it's totally improper. Jai Gohil argued this is extremely misleading, and it appears that Marlisa Ferreira has no qualms about repeatedly doing this type of stuff. Again, he feels that Marlisa Ferreira is trying to mislead the jury. Again, it is more what they call a 352, which is evidence, the evidence code, and he says it's misleading information. Judge Iniga says that she has lost track with all the arguments that have been made, and asks Marlisa Ferreira what is it that she wants to do. Marlisa Ferreira said Robert Woody said the first Frank Carson meet where they discussed the thefts was when the day D took him to court. The first time that he had gone to court, though, there were other court dates prior to the dismissal date, and Baljeet had taken him to court. Marlisa Ferreira said Robert Woody is saying different things now, but the phone evidence gives another picture when there was more than one meet on 1/28 of 2012 and 2/14 of 2012, and there was one on 3/26, which were all prior to the homicide. And what she's talking about, there's phone records that shows that they were both Atwell brothers were both in Modesto at the time, and then there was another day they were both in Turlock at the same time, so they couldn't have been in Modesto. It really gets a little weird on some of this stuff that's been so disproved. So Judge Zuniga asked Marlisa Ferreira what she wants to do is impeach her witness to show that he is confused or doesn't know what he's talking about. Attorney Hans argued that Marlisa Ferreira is talking about the phone evidence and has no information to that. What she's saying, Robert Woody's statements with Steve Jacobson, who spent several hours with Robert Woody and said that the meets were prior to the homicide. And that's what Steve Jacobson was trying to tell him, that the meets were prior to the homicide, and they were going through paperwork and stuff, trying to paint a picture that Robert Woody cannot confirm. Robert Woody has repeatedly said the Frank Carson first meeting was on the thefts was the day that his court date he was dismissed. His charges were dismissed in court. Marlisa Ferreira saying, well, at this time we can delay this until another time. The jury's been sitting downstairs, and she's extremely concerned about the jury getting called up and giving them some court time. I thought that was very nice of her. So the jury finally came up at 10:21 a.m. Robert Woody was on the stand. She asked Robert Woody if he first met Frank Carson after the homicide. He said that Frank Carson did appear in some earlier court appearances. So that was a little bit different than what she was talking about, where they were talking about when he first talked about the thefts and when he first met Frank Carson. The other arguments was about when he first talked about the thefts on his property. Now she's just talking about the first time he met Frank Carson. He said Daljeet was with him with Robert Woody at Frank Carson's office. Robert Woody says he has trouble with dates and times and that types of things. And he had first met Frank Carson when he agreed to represent Woody on this case. Robert Woody had told officers that Baljeet Atwal was checking Frank Carson's property 2 to 3 times a week prior to the homicide. He knew through both brothers that he was checking, that the property was being checked for thefts and activity that were theft related on the property. He did not recall if he knew the checks were going on prior to the homicide. Talking in regards to Beverly Woody and the comment that the last jump that Corey Kaufman will make, or the kid will make, is asked if he told the officers on that, and there was objections. It was improper. Improper refreshment, and I'm not feeling very good, so I'm sorry. I'm kind of stuttering through this. And he refreshed himself on the 3/1/14 interview. Remember, that was the first date that he was in custody. He refreshed. When he refreshed, he says, yeah, it was Cooley's stepson, Keith Hobbs, that had told him that Corey Kaufman had jumped the fence. She asked him about the gates on the property and the man gate where he went in that night. And she asked him if he had recalled what he had told officers on 3/1/14. Again, he did not recall. He refreshed. Page had some of Marlisa's handwritten notes that she was using to refresh, and it kind of led to a few defense objections because she's handing him not a sterile piece of paper that has the interview on it, or any of that documentation. It has her notes and her personal things on it. And they found a clean copy. I think the judge provided it to give to Woody to read. Yeah, Robert Woody did say that he went through the man gate on the property. It's what they call it a man gate. He says it's a small gate. He was asked if the big gate was closed. He said yes. He was asked did he note a lock on the gate. He did not recall. Did he tell law enforcement about the gates? He did not recall. In the 3/1/14 interview, he had been using drugs and drinking prior to his arrest. He said she asked him how he was feeling. He said how he felt during the interview. He said he felt okay. He was not drunk. He could pretty much understand the officers. He said he held back some information because they had told him to keep his mouth shut, and he was doing the best he can. His answers, though, were not coming out clean. He said he was not truthful. He says he was told that if he kept his mouth shut, he would get out. And this was prior to this. And the Atwals had told him, don't talk to law enforcement officers. He was asked how much education he has, and he didn't understand that question at all. And so finally she got it out of him that he had finished high school through home study, but had no further education than that. There was a long sidebar that the judge had called, and the judge was marking parts of transcripts that Marlisa Ferreira was given to her. I think she was given her sites that she was going to use, so they were marking transcripts. Again, Marlisa went back to redirect on Woody, and she asked him if he never told Kurt Bunch in the 3/1/14 interview how he felt. But he said, no, he didn't think so. But he did said that he was afraid that he would end up like Corey Kaufman. He said he could say whatever he wanted, and they would deny it in regards to the Outlaws. So they kept talking about the Outlaws apparently, and he kept denying it. Talked about the Mike Cooley visit with Daljeet Atwal. He had been to Frank Carson's office prior to that visit that day. She asked if he recalled every word that Frank Carson said. He said that, and he didn't have to refresh on this. He said Frank Carson said there's a problem with people on his property stealing property, and law enforcement are lazy and not doing anything about it, and he gave him the address to go to talk to Mike Cooley. He did not recall anything else. He also said that Frank Carson said that he cannot say anything more, that there is some more information, but he cannot put anything more that would put him on the spot. Robert Woody did not recall being in the courtroom prior to that visit. Apparently, there was something in the transcript that he was refreshing with that he didn't understand, and he was having a conversation with a judge up there. The judge called the attorneys up to the sidebar to discuss that, just to let him know. And Robert Woody says, well, Your Honor, I'll just read around it and work around it. And he said he came to the office. Oh, when he was at court, Frank Carson told him to come to the office and he can do him a favor. And then he was asked to go to Mike Cooley's and talk to him about the thefts. He had told officers, he said, that he had went to Cooley's. He doesn't know why he did it. He did not recall what he told investigators or when he did it. He said he felt bad that he wasn't charged and didn't have to pay for anything, so he felt that he owed Frank Carson one for dealing with his case. He was asked by Marlisa Ferreira if arrested, was he told by anyone what to do or say, and he said he didn't recall. Refreshes again. He said Bobby and Dee both told him that if he gets arrested, they will get him out, get him an attorney, and bail him out. He said he did not get bailed out, and he was told that Frank Carson would represent him and take care of the issue. But Frank Carson did not represent him. Did the Atwells, she asked if any Atwells said anything else. They just said that don't give any information to law enforcement officers. It was and that statement was made prior to the investigators coming to the store, maybe 4 or 7 days prior. And again, Frank Carson did not represent him. The Atwells did not visit Robert Woody at the jail. He was asked, with all the objections, there was lots of them, any reason why Frank Carson didn't represent. Judge overruled all the objections, and he said the Atwell said that Frank Carson could not represent him because of his possible involvement, all of their possible involvements in the case. He was asked if he told officers that on March 1st of 2014, and he said that Daljeet Atwal was checking the property just prior to the homicides and told officers that Daljeet Atwal was checking the property and knew that from both Dee and Bobby Atwal saying something about it. And he was told that they were checking the property to see if because of the theft activity going on the property. At this point, the jury was sent out. It was around 11:51. The jury was sent to lunch. They talked about a couple minor things and some scheduling stuff. So I left out and came down here to do the report. Again, we're back at 1:30, and with Robert Woody still going to be on the stand. I got a feeling he will be for a while, and he will. Don't forget the podcast tonight. And I was going to say Robert Woody will probably be on the stand through next week, the rate that this is going. Don't forget the podcast tonight at 6 o'clock.